The clips from trailers, movies, and other YouTube videos are for educational use only. Enjoy our video podcast.
We imagine a future, and our imaginings horrify us. They won't fear it until they understand it. And they won't understand it until they've used it. Theory will take you only so far. I don't know if we can be trusted with such a weapon. But we have no choice.
Julius Robert Oppenheimer, born in New York on April 22, 1904, was an American physicist most famously known for his work on the Manhattan Project. Due to his work, he is frequently referred to as the father of the atomic bomb. And the Oppenheimer film did a fantastic job representing these events, what had happened, what was going on, all these well-known, famous geniuses and great minds that created the atomic bomb, and ultimately showed the aftermath of what people were concerned about. Now, for this particular video podcast, we are going to dissect understanding your role on a project. And the Oppenheimer film did a fantastic job in showing these 4 steps that we're going to review. The first step is identifying the role, understanding what the role is, acting within the role, and the impacts the role has. So the first step with Oppenheimer's role on the Manhattan Project is that he identified his role. Now, his original identification was that he was going to bring physics to America. And as you see in the film, he had to go to Europe in order to accomplish that. So he worked alongside with like J.J. Thomson, Niels Bohr, Max Born, where he not only graduated at the top of his class, he achieved many accomplishments, including nuclear physics, quantum mechanics, and even developed the Born-Oppenheimer approximation, which was used for molecular wave functions. And this is very important because when he comes back in 1936, Oppenheimer became a full professor of the physics department at the University of California at Berkeley until 1942, which is when we get into the recruitment for the Manhattan Project. Now, in project management, during the initiating phase, the very first step is to identify the project manager. So we have to identify the role first in order to proceed to the next steps. And this is not only a project management function, this is a function that all of us go through throughout life, whether that's within family dynamics, whether that's in our romantic relationships, our friendships, even within our own work societies or work groups or fraternities, sororities within a college campus. Identifying your role is extremely important and essential to you as a member of society to function, whether that's from a project standpoint or from a personal standpoint. Because once you've identified your role, you then have to lead into the next step. And that next step is Oppenheimer understanding what his role is. Now, before we can even get to that, though, we have to keep in mind that in August of 1939, Albert Einstein was persuaded by his fellow scientists to use his influence to present the military potential of an uncontrolled fission chain reaction to Franklin D. Roosevelt. Einstein's 2 main points in the continuation of the effort written in his letter was to approach government departments, keep them informed of the further development, and put forward recommendations for government action giving particular attention to the problem of the securing a supply of uranium ore for the United States, and to speed up the experimental work which is at present being carried on within the limits of the budget of university laboratories by providing funds, if such funds be required, through his contacts with private persons who are willing to make contributions for this cause, and perhaps also by obtaining cooperation of industrial laboratories which have necessary equipment. And so with that letter, FDR says, okay, I'm in, let's make this project happen. Now, of course, the government's trying to identify a potential project director, and they did identify Oppenheimer as such. But here's the problem. Oppenheimer had already identified his role, which was to bring physics to America. But what he didn't understand was that his role was just more than bringing physics to America. Now, of course, the government was very nervous about a lot of things that he was doing, as demonstrated in the film, where he was at, communist events. He was having very left-leaning political views. He was trying to get the professors at Berkeley to unionize, and it made the government very nervous to even consider informing him of this project for him to decide whether he wants to be part of the effort or not. And there is a scene in the film where his friend, that was the experimental physicist, he was like, dude, what are you doing? You are more than just a professor. You are a genius. You are an extremely intelligent man that we need on this effort. And you can't be brought on because of the choices you are making. And in that particular moment, Oppenheimer went, okay, now I understand what my role really is. And this is vital because once he understood that, then he started to kind of pull back on his communist ties. He started to kind of slow down on all the political left-leaning views that he had. And that's where we then get the scene with Leslie Groves, who comes in to offer the job to Oppenheimer. And particularly the fact that he was chosen to be the project director. And in that same scene, this is where Oppenheimer identifies the Los Alamos location, which of course leads into the third point of this entire discussion. Thus leads into Oppenheimer acting within his role. So now that he's identified it, now that he understands it, he has to act within it. So once he became the project director for the Manhattan Project, he supervised the building of the Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico and compiled a group of the best physicists to assist him in creating the atomic bomb. Now, of course, they had received a British report on atomic bombs in the spring of 1941, and the Roosevelt administration formed the S-1 Committee of Military and Academic Experts to focus on an atomic weapon development project. And in 1942, Oppenheimer was given the title of S-1's Coordinator of Rapid Rupture, meaning he oversaw research of fast neuron chain reaction in the atomic bomb. And so in the film, you see how when the Los Alamos laboratory area was being built, he was told, hey, you're, stretched really thin already because you not only are the project director, you're also overseeing this group, and which you see how he quickly recoordinates roles and says, okay, well, instead of me being a project director and overseeing this group, we'll put so-and-so in this group instead, or have you oversee it, which was his friend. In addition to that, Oppenheimer had greatly underestimated the size of the project, as shown by the fact that the population of Los Alamos increased from a few hundred in 1943 to over 6,000 in 1945, which of course that I think was closer to the end of the project. Leslie Grove was kind of saying, hey, there's more people and so many kids around, and obviously they, all these physicists, they brought their wives, and what else are they going to do, right? And so, of course, Oppenheimer first struggled with the organizational division of big groups, but after settling permanently on the Mesa, he quickly learned the skill of large-scale administration, and he was praised for his leadership of every scientific part of the project, as well as his attempts to manage the inevitable misunderstandings between scientists and the military over cultural differences. He served as both a scientific director and an iconic figure for others who were researchers serving as an example of the goals they shared. And this is also great because we see the conflict resolution and management from Oppenheimer on numerous occasions. And particularly, there's one that really stuck out to me where there was one scientist who wanted to focus on hydrogen research instead. And of course, he was too busy researching that he wasn't really contributing. And so his team kind of was like, hey, but we really need this, and we're focused on atomic, not hydrogen. And so that one scientist that was researching hydrogen, he was about to leave. So he, drops his badge, he's going to leave. Oppenheimer quickly readdressed the group in a way where he said, okay, so-and-so, you take this, so-and-so, we're going to move you over here instead. And then he stopped the other person and said, look, stay on the project, continue your research on hydrogen, and you meet with me once a week. Fantastic. And another form of conflict resolution that he performed was in the scene where there was debate and questioning on whether to continue the atomic bomb research and build the bomb since Germany had surrendered. Which, of course, at that point, Oppenheimer's like, look, we still have Japan. And, of course, then what was brought up was all the concerns about, well, we don't know what this is going to do, which we'll get to when we talk about the Trinity test. But Oppenheimer said in that quote, they won't understand it until they have seen it. So then, of course, alongside some Army officers and a physicist named Kenneth Bainbridge, Oppenheimer chose a space in central New Mexico, which they codenamed Trinity for the first atomic bomb test, which was huge. And I will say was my favorite scene in the entire movie, because one of the things they captured that I greatly enjoyed, even though it was a little morbid, was the taking of bets. And one of the big bets was that they were determining whether they were going to end the world or actually set off a bomb. And so, of course, in addition to that, the site chosen was a remote corner on the Alamogordo bombing range known as the Jornada del Muerto, or Journey of Death, 210 miles south of Los Alamos. And at precisely 5:30 a.m. on Monday, July 16, 1945, the nuclear age began. While Manhattan Project staff members watched anxiously, the device exploded over the New Mexico desert, vaporizing the tower and turning the asphalt around the base of the tower to green sand. Seconds after the explosion came a huge blast wave and heat searing out across the desert. No one could see the radiation generated by the explosion, but they all knew it was there. The steel container, Jumbo, weighing over 200 tons and transported to the desert only to be eliminated from the test, was knocked ajar even though it stood half a mile from ground zero. As the orange and yellow fireball stretched up and spread, a second column narrower than the first rose and flattened into a mushroom shape, thus providing the atomic age with a visual image that becomes imprinted on human consciousness as a symbol of power and awesome destruction. And even when the atomic bomb was tested and successful, Oppenheimer still acted with a sense of care. And you could see that because he's now seen the destruction for himself, as so as others, even though he had the calculations and so forth, and still acted with great care and with great responsibility, which of course leads into our final point for roles. Our final point that we come to with Oppenheimer's role in the Manhattan Project is Oppenheimer's understanding of his role's impact. So, the little boy atomic bomb was developed at Los Alamos and was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. The Fat Man nuclear bomb was dropped on Nagasaki on August 9th, 1945. And a couple people who were part of that event and witnessed Oppenheimer had stated, one had said, a sense of gloom settled over the lab, and an FBI informant also stated that Oppenheimer was a nervous wreck. After all that, on August 17, 1945, Oppenheimer went to Washington to hand-deliver a letter to the Secretary of War to assert his distaste and want to see the banning of nuclear weapons. And then in October 1945, Oppenheimer met with President Truman to advocate for international control of atomic weapons. Of course, that angered Truman. Oppenheimer's statement that he believed he had blood on his hands caused the meeting to come to an end. Truman was enraged by the comment, which caused the meeting to be finished. And we see that scene where Truman pulls out the handkerchief from his pocket and hands it to him. And of course, he, along those lines, says, like, the people aren't concerned about who made the bomb. They're concerned about who dropped the bomb, which is he's saying he was the one, I dropped the bomb, the blood is on my hands kind of deal, and dismissed anything that Oppenheimer was thinking or feeling. So, of course, Oppenheimer became a national spokesperson for science as well as a symbol of a new kind of technocratic power as a result of the Manhattan Project, which was top secret and only made public after the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He gained recognition and had a picture on the covers of magazines such as Life and Time, and we saw that too in the film. As every nation in the world started to recognize the strategic and political power that comes with nuclear weapons, nuclear physics emerged as a powerful weapon as well. Like many scientists of his time, he believed that the only global body that could put into effect a program to stop a nuclear arms race was the newly established United Nations. And I think that's where we see the meeting with Strauss and all the other scientists that were a part of it, and how they were having those discussions about the hydrogen bomb, right? You know, you could see the apprehension that Oppenheimer had because he knew and understood the consequences. And then the result being made from, of course, the Trinity test and then the bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima made it very clear to him that we really need to control this. We can't let this get out of hand. Obviously, as we now know with our current affairs, how many times do we see politicians trying to avoid a war because of the fact with certain nations they have nuclear bombs themselves? However, Oppenheimer's security clearance was revoked because of his positions during the Second Red Scare and his prior connections to the Communist Party USA after a 1954 security hearing. His career as a nuclear physicist and access to the government's atomic secrets were essentially ended as a result, which was at kind of the end of the film. Now, I'm going to start this conversation on the fact that many project managers, from my professional experience, have lost sight at times of how their role impacts their team, their project, the business value, and the result to achieve that business value, and even their clients. So many times we get lost in what we've accomplished, what have we done, what we're trying to do, how amazing our project is, or how amazing something we're doing is. And what ends up happening is that we make decisions that then impact those around us. And the Manhattan Project was fantastic because it was great scientific research. It was a great scientific achievement. However, it's kind of like the phrase in Jurassic Park where Goldman's character says, yeah, well, the scientists were too busy about if they could. They didn't stop and think if they should. And that's very applicable to not just project managers. This is applicable to everyone because we sometimes keep thinking if we could get something done that we don't think about if we should get it done. And so I end this particular segment on saying understanding your role from identifying to understanding what it is to acting within it and understanding the impact your role has is extremely essential to any well-rounded PM. And with that, thank you all for joining me on this video podcast, and I hope to see you in the next video.